It's been a minute. I haven't seen him in a little while, but it's good to see his handsome face. Good morning and morena to Reverend Frank Ritchie.
Atamaria, nice to know that the whole team is there in the studio. It's been a long time, so I wish I could have been in the studio, but I'm at home.
I don't know who set up your camera thing there at your house there, Frank, but you could be a top-level YouTube personality with that sort of setup. It's very crisp. It's very nice. You look great.
Who used to say that
Thank
he's
you.
not?
It's,
Look at
it's
it.
all my own work.
It's very crisp. You could just have a 3 News logo at the back of you and you'd be ready to roll.
Correspondent Frank Ritchie
Just a
on
bit
the
of green
scene.
screen.
We've got a couple of important topics to talk to you about. One is around humility. We'll get to that in just a little bit, but the first one, we dive into the Royal Commission of Inquiry report around abuse, which was released a couple of weeks ago. I think you would have dived into that. I'm pretty sure you would have dived into that. But we spoke to a doctor a couple of days ago.
Yeah, a theologian who works in trauma of people who have been through abuse, especially in faith-based institutions, and her herself is a survivor of that, and she was giving us some insight and some ideas about what we can do moving forward and how to accept this and how to respond. And we were just sort of talking about the idea of, why is it important, Frank, and why do you think it's important or necessary for individuals to take responsibility for something that maybe they themselves did not do or partake in, right? Because there'll be a lot of Christians who horrified seeing the report, and if you go and read it, it's very confronting and terrible. But then at the same time, there'll be some people, I imagine, feeling a little bit odd to be like, I didn't do any of that, and the church I go to, the things that I'm a part of, don't have a history of that. So am I still responsible for it?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it feeds obviously into this issue, but it feeds over into other things as well. Like when you think about the history of New Zealand and people who may have acknowledged that there are past grievances against Māori in this country, but then say things like, "But I didn't do it. That was history." It's a really good thing to consider, and it's a really good thing for us Christians to consider in light of the report that shows the horrific abuse that has taken place in faith-based institutions. We live in a really individualist society. So it's really easy for us just to go, well, I didn't do it, so why should I have to take responsibility? But we're not simply individuals. We're also part of communities, part of many communities. Like I identify, if I really thought about the communities that I'm a part of, there would be many. And as a Christian minister, I am part of the church. I'm part of faith-based institutions. I'm part of a group that declares the same gospel as some of those institutions would have declared when children went into them. So whilst I have not personally been responsible for those activities, there's an element where I represent the community. Every time I talk about the gospel, every time I claim to be a part of the church, I'm representing that community. If someone has been abused and they talk to me, there's an element where I am connected to those institutions, not directly, but by association through community. So whilst it's not a guilt that I need to carry myself, I recognize that when I speak, that speaking takes place on behalf of, to a degree, that community, which is why we Christians always need to think about the things that we say publicly, because we're representing our wider community and we're representing the gospel, we're representing Jesus. So I have the ability, though it's not me who committed the acts, I have the ability to either further the hurt and further the damage, or I have the ability to be part of the healing and redeeming. So acknowledging the truth of what's taken place and being part of making things right is the ability to be a part of the redeeming and the healing. So I think we need to very carefully consider what we say whenever we speak about these things.
Could you just speak to what the redeeming and what the healing looks like as far as the church is concerned?
Yeah, I think fully acknowledging it, like it's extremely easy to get defensive And for that defensiveness can take many forms: to minimize what's been done, to say things like, well, it wasn't me, it wasn't us, it was them, it was those evil people, which just sidelines the issue, fully acknowledging the damage that's been done. And I think in many, many cases, these institutions are going to have to grapple with what real compensation looks like, understanding the damage, the very real damage that's been done in people's lives. That's the next step. So I think a lot of institutions, including the government, will make public apologies. I know the government's public apology is coming, formal public apology is coming in November. But then the bigger, harder issue is, what does compensation look like? How do we help these people get back on their feet where very real damage has been done that has ripped apart their lives? And that's where the making things right and the real work of justice becomes much harder.
There is a summary of the report. You can read the full thing if you want to. There is a summary online that the person we spoke to earlier this week recommended every Christian and every, especially church leader, should read, just to get a full scope and understanding of what has gone on in the past, to understand kind of where we are now. And you can find that online if you do want to read it, although it will be a difficult one.
And can I just encourage people, if you do have the stomach for it, it is hard reading, so maybe take it in chunks. It's a really good thing to read because it will help us, especially as people of faith, grapple with some of the present issues our country faces. When we look at some of the present things that hit our headlines, it's very easy to react and just want to go down the retribution punishment line when people do things that are bad. But through reading this report, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who have been abused in state care over a number of decades. That has led to a number of social issues. So when we see things that are going wrong, not only should we go, what punishment needs to be meted out here, and go for the kind of hard and fast law and punishment line in politics, but when we start to ask the question, why is this happening, I think you'll find that quite a number of the answers sit in that report.
Appreciate your time on that, Frank. Stick around, because we're going to look at humility. And what does that look like in the age of social media? That's next here at Life. In studio with us, actually via Zoom. You wouldn't know it though. It's pretty flash. Is Reverend Frank Ritchie. Good morning, Rev, again.
Good morning. I love it every time you point out how cool my setup is. It just makes me feel good about myself.
Well, it's very cool. We're very jealous at this end. Our Bible Society verses of the day this week. I'm liking it. I like the theme. It's around humility, and we got to speaking in the out in the broadcasting floor yesterday, how that looks like in a world of social media, where those who haven't got a platform want a platform, and those who have a platform have to navigate, well, how does that look when I want to promote something, promote myself, but still stay in the lane of maybe being a little bit humble. You know, it's a very hard thing to navigate. And we were talking about this yesterday.
Yeah, a bit of a tightrope to walk, really, because self-promotion in a lot of different ways. I mean, it's easy to think of like social media as like, you know, trashy, look at me kind of content online, but a lot of people have all sorts of different things. You've got LinkedIn, you've got even like, I think of even putting yourself forward for a job where you've got to say, yeah, I can do this. I believe this and blah, blah, blah. And here's why I would be the best fit. How do you have a posture of humility amongst living in a world where you also need to put yourself forward? And what does that sort of look like to you from a biblical and Christian sense, Frank?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and totally different angle from what I thought you were going to take. I thought you were going to talk about controversies and arguments online. So let's go there sometime in the future, because that's a topic that I love. But this is a good one, because this is one that I have to grapple with. Yep. I mean, when I think about my own world and how I do what I do in the world, and my engagement with media, and how I make sure that media are aware of what I do as a chaplain and what Media Chaplaincy New Zealand does, it involves a lot of online self-promotion. And I've gotten to this point where I feel like I live in this tension. I've got to the point where I don't actually like social media that much at all. Once upon a time, I loved it. COVID broke that. And now I don't really like it. But I feel like I need to be there, and I need to constantly put myself in front of people in order to make people aware of what it is that I do. So I think there should almost be this feeling of tension. if you don't have that feeling of tension with social media and putting selfies up and videos and talking yourself up, then I think you're missing something. That tension is what I think keeps us honest, and keeps us questioning everything that we do online. And I think we should be constantly questioning what it is that we do online. I'm really down the line now that social media is at the point where it's doing as much damage, if not more damage, than the good it does. And I think if you can get to that place, chances are what you're going to do online is going to be healthy, as opposed to just wanting to be noticed and wanting to have influence, wanting people to see you, and constantly looking at the likes and the clicks and the engagements. I think if you're constantly picking up your phone and you're looking at the likes of the last thing that you put up, you're probably in a little bit of trouble. And I've been there, and I'm still am there sometimes. I get tempted by that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, Bjorn and I have had this conversation as well about dealing with social media and how I'm pretty much, I think I sit in the same camp as you. I think Bjorn does as well, that it's annoying. It's an annoying place, but like you, we're in a media platform as well, where there's a level of that promotion that we have to be able to be, seen and all that sort of stuff. But you talk about the tension that you have to have when you're questioning sort of the content that you may be pushing up online. So if you are in that tension space and you do decide to put something online, are you giving into the space of where social media is, or what are you doing?
Again, I think you've got to be very clear on your why. So if, like, what's an example? Like, I've got a bunch of videos going up on Instagram at the moment for a podcast that I do called Recovering, where I sit down with some of New Zealand's most well-known journalists, and we talk about their career, and we talk about the story that's had the biggest impact on them personally and professionally. Personally, I think it's a really good podcast, but that's going up quite constantly at the moment. But the why of that is so that people will see snippets of those conversations and then go and listen to the podcast and then get to know our journalists a little better behind the scenes, get to know them as human beings. So that there's a very clear why as to that going up. I've done some photos at the moment that go up on Instagram. A couple of them are selfies where I've been playing with a new lens. And I put them up because there's a community that I want to attach to. So there's tags in there of the lens that I'm using, because I want to connect to other people who are using that same lens so I can see how they're using that lens. So there's a very clear why. So every time we go to post something, this goes with the controversies as well, and all the arguments, we should be asking why. And if there's not a clear why that we can justify, then we probably need to think about what it is that we're posting. So have good, clear whys as to why you're using social media and everything that you're posting.
We'll make sure that your link is in the wire as well.
10% discount, frankritchie.com.
Link in bio.
Hey, I think that's a great place to finish, actually, just the asking yourself why.
Yeah.
What's your motivations? What's your heart behind basically anything you do? Frank, been nice to catch up with you as usual, and hopefully we'll be able to give you a big old hug next time we see you in studio.
Always a pleasure, team. Thank you.